Welcome to Visions of the Past. I'm Nancy D. We're reading from Phil Junsrud's new book, 80 Years in the Same Neighborhood. In the last episode, we learned in 1800 our country's leaders knew very little about the western frontier. Lewis and Clark were sent in 1803 to explore the land west of the Mississippi known as Indian Country, and to see if the Oregon Territory was a land of value. They returned to St. Louis in August 1806 with news that Oregon was very much a land of value. With ownership of the Oregon Territory still in question, though, the Congress began to encourage migration to the west. Our story continues with the migration of settlers coming to Oregon. The Oregon Trail, and especially the Barlow Trail, played a major role in the beginning for the little village of Sandy. Sit back and relax and picture yourself in the 1800s as we explore Sandy through the show Visions of the Past. We're going to take a trip to Philip Foster Farm in Eagle Creek, who took a great big role in helping the settlers on the Oregon Trail. An early arrival in the Oregon country was Philip Foster, who had come by ship around Cape Horn. He settled in Oregon City, where Dr. John McLaughlin had a land claim and where the Oregon Trail ended. Foster, active in the community, was elected treasurer of the territorial government in the election of 1844. He was said to have been successful at Oregon City in the sawmill business and was listed as a prominent landholder when the first property taxes were collected in 1844. About that time, Foster acquired property east of Oregon City at what now is known as Eagle Creek at the junction of State Highway 211 and 224. The settlement that evolved there was first known as Jackknife and was built around the Foster store. When Foster located there, he couldn't have known that Sam Barlow would find a route for a road around the south side of Mount Hood, and that the first sign of civilization to the Barlow party would be Foster's settlement. Foster was able to sell supplies to many immigrants that would travel this new route. He also gave much help to the weary travelers, many of whom rested at the Foster campground for a few days before making the final lap and trip to Oregon City. In 1850, Foster and his neighbors petitioned the territorial government for a public school in their area. Approval was granted in August of that year. The Eagle Creek District was a huge area that included what we now know as Sandy, Boring, Orient, Cottrell, Lusted, Cherryville, Dover, Furwood, Welches, and all other districts south of the Sandy River. This was the first school in the Sandy Estacada area. Their boundaries didn't change until the Revenue School District was formed in 1870. Beginning in about 1832, missionaries started coming west with the idea of converting the Indians to Christianity. The Whitmans established a mission in Walla Walla, but their stay ended tragically when they were murdered during an Indian uprising in 1857. Another missionary was Jason Lee, who established Methodist missions in the Willamette Valley and was well known throughout the area. With ownership of the Oregon Territory still in question, the U.S. Congress began to encourage migration to the west. The Oregon Trail from Illinois and Missouri to Oregon City, Oregon was gradually developing as a road. Though in many places it was still more of a trail than a road, by 1840 a few covered wagons drawn by ox teams were getting through as far as the Dalles. From there it was necessary to break down the wagons and load them together with their supplies onto rafts for the rest of the trip through the Columbia Gorge to Portland, where they then assembled their wagons for the final trips to Oregon City. Cattle were driven separately on trails on the north side of the Columbia or on Indian trails over the Lolo Pass area to Oregon City. Rafting down the Columbia was hazardous, and drownings were not uncommon. Also, portaging was necessary in some areas with rapids. However, some were getting through. Up until about 1840, the British residents in the Oregon country would see no need for a local government, as the British Hudson's Bay Company had chartered powers from Great Britain for this area. Also, by an act of the British Parliament in 1821, the laws of nearby Canada had been made to extend into the Oregon country. Though there were few in number, the Americans in this region were not satisfied with such an arrangement. They wanted local control. It was becoming apparent that there was a need for civil and military protection, a need for a government and a set of laws. After the number of meetings for over several years, nothing was accomplished until the Champoeg meeting of May 2, 1843. There were both Canadians and Americans in attendance. By a vote of 52 to 50, the Americans prevailed and a legislative committee was formed. The provisional government formed in 1843 was weak, but it gained strength from the 875 immigrants of that year arriving late in the fall. Each year a greater number came over the Oregon Trail. The number was said to be around 3,000 in 1845. As more and more immigrants came to Oregon each year, this ever-growing number of Americans gave the area enough political muscle that eventually a treaty was arranged between the U.S. and Great Britain in 1846 that set a northern border of the Oregon Territory at the 49th parallel rather than the Columbia River. Who knows? Without the Great Migration over the Oregon Trail, we Oregonians might now be known as Canadians. Join us each episode as we explore the rich history that surrounds our growing area. Thank you for joining us. I'm Nancy D., keeping you in touch with Visions of the Past.